So imagine holding this 5-page letter in your hands. You just finished writing it, and it is basically a masterpiece of righteous anger.
Oh, we've all wanted to write one of those,
Right,
right?
exactly. But this one is real, and it outlines with absolute undeniable proof every single way a specific person manipulated you, lied to you, and, I mean, fundamentally ruined your life.
Just completely destroyed it.
Yeah. And sending this letter would expose them entirely. It would destroy their reputation, and more importantly, it would completely vindicate you. So my question is, would you mail it, or would you tear it up?
Man, I mean, tearing it up feels like letting them win. It feels like surrendering, honestly. But sometimes, letting go of that demand for vindication is actually the only way to escape the person who hurt you.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We're jumping into this really fascinating excerpted YouTube transcript today. It's an interview conducted by Steve Reed with an author named Lloyd Clark.
Yeah, and they're discussing Lloyd's book, which is called The Life I Dreamed of.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is to follow Lloyd's incredible 76-year journey. We're looking at a life that was completely defined by rigid religious structures, the profound trauma of spiritual abuse, and a concept we're going to talk a lot about today, which is radical paradigm shifts.
Yeah, paradigm shifts. I mean, a paradigm shift is basically a total reorganization of how you perceive reality. Think of it like, well, imagine wearing glasses with the completely wrong prescription for your entire life.
Oh, wow. That sounds awful.
Right, you just assume the world is naturally blurry and that just navigating a hallway is supposed to be this agonizing, head-splitting struggle. Then someone suddenly swaps the lenses.
And everything changes.
Everything changes. The physical world around you didn't change at all, but your mechanism for seeing it did. What used to be this impossible obstacle course is suddenly completely clear.
I love that visual. Because whether you consider yourself deeply religious or strictly secular or anywhere in between, the stakes of this story apply directly to you. This is a look at what happens when the systems and the authorities we build our entire lives around just completely betray us. Like, how do you find the strength to rebuild your identity from absolute scratch when the foundational programming you were given at birth turns out to be toxic?
Yeah, and to understand how Lloyd's lenses eventually got swapped, we really have to look at the prescription he was forced to wear from day one. I mean, he was born into an environment of just extreme high-stakes pressure.
Right.
His family had very deep, early Pentecostal roots.
Let's actually contextualize that for someone listening who might not know what that environment looks like, because we aren't just talking about, quietly sitting in a pew for an hour on a Sunday morning, right?
Right. No, far from it. This is a highly emotional, highly demanding spiritual environment. People there expect literal daily miracles and very intense performative faith.
Wow.
And Lloyd's birth mother was actually a pastor herself. She was heavily influenced by Amy Semple McPherson, who was essentially a massive celebrity evangelist at the time.
I've heard of her, yeah.
Yeah, so imagine growing up where your mother is trying to emulate a global superstar of faith. The atmosphere in that house is just charged with this really heavy expectation of spiritual greatness.
And tragically, his mother died when he was only 5 years old,
Mhm.
which is heartbreaking. And then his father eventually remarried, and his new stepmother wasn't just devout. She was quite literally a strict Bible school dean.
Exactly. So the religious structure just became the entire atmosphere he breathed. It was church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and like every single night if there happened to be a revival in town.
Just constant.
Constant. But you get this really brilliant glimpse of the pressure cooker he was living in because of how he and his siblings actually reacted to it. They were, in his own words, absolute
He
hooligans.
tells these crazy stories, like shooting BB guns at the backsides of people walking past their house and starting massive field fires. It is just pure, chaotic childhood rebellion against this hyper-structured environment. But beneath that hooliganism, there was this invisible psychological weight that most kids never have to carry.
Yeah, it was the weight of a predetermined destiny. His parents held very strict beliefs. For instance, they believed sex was strictly for procreation.
Wow.
Yeah, they explicitly prayed and sought divine permission before even conceiving him. So from the absolute moment he took his first breath, he was dedicated to be a preacher. He was branded as Grandma's preacher boy.
I mean, how heavy is a backpack you don't even know you're wearing? That is an immense burden for a kid.
It really is.
He carried that specific, rigid destiny, that immense pressure to perform and be this one specific thing for 50 years. He said it became like a demon to him.
Yeah.
He pushed that identity as far as humanly possible, just trying to force himself into the mold until it physically broke him. He actually suffered a 25-pound weight loss before that desperate drive to fulfill someone else's destiny finally collapsed.
And in the midst of carrying that crazy weight, as a young man trying to figure out how to be a pastor and a husband and a father, he obviously goes looking for a lifeline.
Right, he needs some kind of structure.
Exactly. The broader charismatic religious movement at the time was highly chaotic. People were, as he described it, bouncing off the walls with emotion, but there was very little practical guidance. So he joined something called the discipleship movement, led by charismatic figures like a man named Bob Mumford.
Okay, so let me push back a little here. Why do smart people voluntarily join highly rigid authoritarian systems? Because Lloyd explicitly states that this movement actually helped him at first,
They
right?
did, yeah.
It taught him how to be a husband and a father. It gave him the structure he was basically starving for. So how does a lifeline like that turn into a toxic trap?
Because honestly, chaos is terrifying. When you are drowning in uncertainty, a system that hands you a clear, top-down manual for how to live your life feels incredibly safe.
That makes sense.
It's a psychological dynamic we see everywhere. Have you ever taken a job where the corporate culture promised you they were family and they gave you a perfectly mapped out path to success?
Oh, definitely.
At first, it's a massive relief. You don't have to think. You just have to follow the rules.
But the hidden cost of those easy answers is total unquestioning submission.
Precisely. The discipleship movement evolved into this highly authoritarian pyramid structure. The leaders at the very top might have actually started with genuinely good intentions, trying to provide order.
Sure.
But as that power filtered down the pyramid to immature leaders, control just became the ultimate goal. The metric for success was no longer spiritual growth or your personal well-being. It was absolute obedience to the guy above you.
And the really wild part is that the leaders used the text itself to build the cage. Lloyd mentions that Bob Mumford, one of those top leaders you mentioned, actually realized the immense psychological damage they were causing and publicly apologized years later.
Yeah, that was huge.
Mumford released a sermon literally titled, "I Repent," which was such a big deal it made the front page of a major Christian magazine.
And Mumford's admission is really one of the most chilling parts of this whole story. He told Lloyd that it was, quote unquote, scripture and verse that led him into that abusive structure.
Wow. They used the very tools they thought were bringing them enlightenment to justify manipulation.
Exactly. It shows you how deep that mental programming goes. When you are inside that system, you aren't just fighting a bad manager. You are literally conditioned to believe you are fighting the divine order of the universe.
But building an identity on someone else's rigid rules has a fatal flaw, right?
Yeah.
It only survives until you ask your first unauthorized question.
Right. Unquestioning submission is mathematically unsustainable for a curious human being. Eventually, Lloyd started having questions. He challenged the leadership structure.
And how did this system react?
The way all authoritarian systems react to a threat, swift and brutal excommunication,
Just immediately cut off.
totally exiled. He lost his church, his community, and his livelihood in one fell swoop. He became a complete pariah. The very people he had mentored and brought into the movement were suddenly blackballing him and spreading lies about him.
His entire world just collapses. So desperate, he moves to Mobile, Alabama, seeking guidance from a mentor named Billy Duke.
Yeah, he went by the nickname Barnabas.
Right, Barnabas. So Lloyd is just crawling into this guy's office every single Sunday, completely shattered, basically waiting for someone to tell him what to do next.
And Billy Duke shares this ancient biblical story with him about Abraham digging wells in the desert. According to the story, Abraham's enemies kept filling his first two wells with rocks, which Billy compared to the bitterness and resentment that Lloyd was obviously feeling.
Right, all that baggage.
Yeah. But Abraham didn't stay and fight over those ruined wells. He moved on and dug a third well, and his enemies finally left him alone. He named that third well Room Enough.
Room enough. The message is pretty clear. Stop fighting over the poisoned water and go find somewhere you actually have room to breathe. And Lloyd takes this completely to heart. He gathers his family, takes $10,000 in maxed out credit card debt, and drives across the continent. He goes as far away from the abuse as geographically possible, landing on Vancouver Island to dig his third well.
But the physical distance didn't actually solve the internal crisis. He describes the next 3 to 4 years on Vancouver Island as just eking out a bare existence.
I want you to picture this if you're listening.
Yeah.
Imagine being locked in the basement of a beautiful 5-star tropical resort.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. You are physically surrounded by the absolute majesty of Vancouver Island, white-capped mountains, huge green trees, the ocean breeze. But internally, you are starving, paranoid, and just waiting for the ceiling to cave in. Lloyd called it an exile in paradise.
And that phrase is just a masterclass in describing the lingering trauma of authoritarian abuse. He physically escaped. He was, as he called it, off the plantation.
But his mind wasn't.
Exactly. The mental programming remained entirely intact. He was still a slave in his own mind. The system had taught him that defying the leaders was the exact same thing as defying God. Because he had been cast out, he genuinely believed he was cursed.
That is so dark.
He spent years constantly introspecting, constantly looking over his shoulder, convinced that every single business venture he touched would fail because he was fundamentally out of line with the universe.
That psychological paralysis is exactly why he couldn't succeed, even when he was surrounded by literal paradise. Which really brings us to the ultimate breaking point. Hitting rock bottom forces this terrifying choice.
Yeah.
Lloyd tells his wife, Mary, that they must have missed the path. Nothing is working, they are totally broke, and he believes the absolute only solution is to go crawling back to their abusers and apologize.
And Mary's response is the catalyst for everything that follows. She flatly refuses.
Good for her.
Right. She tells him, go back to Egypt, I'm not going. She draws this hard line in the sand and refuses to return to emotional slavery, even if the wilderness they're in is killing them.
But the programming is so deep that Lloyd makes the call anyway. He calls his former leader, who he refers to in the book as Phil, begging to come back into the fold. And shockingly, Phil is incredibly warm.
Very welcoming.
Yeah. He says, oh, Lloyd, it would be wonderful to have you back. Everybody misses you. We love you.
It seems like the perfect resolution until Lloyd casually asks about a mutual friend of theirs named Steve. Steve was someone who had previously sent Lloyd a very harsh letter when Lloyd first left the group.
Right. And the very moment Steve's name is mentioned, Phil's warm facade just instantly drops. He launches into this vicious, lying tirade against Steve. He calls Steve a Judas, a snake in the grass, evil.
And this is the exact moment the lenses get swapped. This is the first major paradigm shift. Lloyd is sitting there listening to Phil attack Steve, and he experiences this massive cognitive dissonance. The illusion shatters in real time. He realizes, oh my God, he's doing to Steve exactly what he did to me.
Isn't it wild how we sometimes need to see someone else get mistreated to realize we were abused ourselves?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like watching someone else bite into the poisoned apple you've been eating for years. When you're eating it, you just think you have a stomachache. When you watch someone else drop dead from a bite, you suddenly realize, oh, I've been eating poison.
That's a perfect analogy.
For years, Lloyd thought he was the problem. Hearing the blatant lies directed at a third party provided the objective distance he finally needed to see the manipulation. For the very first time, Lloyd labels Phil's behavior as evil.
The spell is officially broken. So Lloyd gets off the phone, goes downstairs, and he writes that 5-page letter we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive.
The masterpiece of righteous anger.
Yes, it is filled with venom. He outlines every lie, every piece of abuse, every way this man destroyed his family's reputation. He brings the finished letter upstairs to Mary and asks, shall we send it? And she says yes.
So he drops it in the mail and burns the bridge.
No, he doesn't send it. He goes back downstairs and shreds the entire thing into tiny pieces.
Wait, really? He just shreds it. After all of that realization, after finally seeing the truth, he destroys his only defense.
Yeah, and this is the most crucial psychological pivot of his life. We have to look at the mechanics of what forgiveness actually means in this context.
Okay.
Tearing up that letter was not about letting the abuser off the hook.
Yeah.
It wasn't him saying the abuse was justified or okay. Forgiveness was the act of severing the mental chain tying Lloyd to his past.
Oh, I see.
If he sent the letter, he was still playing by the abuser's rules. He would still be engaged in their paradigm of attack, defend, and control. By shredding the letter, he opted out of the game entirely. He took his power back by deciding the abuser no longer required a response.
And the external world mirrored his internal shift almost instantly. It is staggering to hear him describe it. He experienced this instant psychological freedom. The very next day, a friend took one look at him and actually asked, what happened to you? You could physically see the weight was gone.
And the real-world consequences followed immediately after that.
Right? A friend calls to apologize for how he was treated during the excommunication. An adoption from Guatemala that his family had been waiting on for 10 agonizing years is suddenly miraculously approved.
Just out of nowhere.
Business opportunities just start manifesting. He goes from barely surviving in an exile state to generating a six-figure income and enjoying decades of financial and personal abundance.
I mean, it sounds like magic, but there is a profound psychological mechanism at work here. When you are spending 90% of your daily mental energy managing trauma, fighting paranoia, and dealing with self-hatred,
You have nothing left.
exactly, you have zero bandwidth left to engage with the world. The moment you drop that mental load, you suddenly have an immense capacity to see opportunities, to build healthy relationships, and to create value. What was physically impossible in the old paradigm became completely effortless in the new one.
Now, a Hollywood movie would roll the credits right there. He found his freedom, he has a thriving business, the end.
But life doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't. The ultimate test of a new paradigm isn't how it handles the past, it's how it handles a fresh, bleeding wound.
Exactly. So we flash forward decades later to 2008. The global economy is tanking. Lloyd has built up a highly successful business called Genesis, manufacturing wrought iron doors. He expands and opens a store in Charlotte, and he hires a young manager he implicitly trusts to run the operation.
And this young manager completely betrays him. He steals $60,000 in cash from the company, which plunges Lloyd $80,000 into debt with his vendors.
Ouch.
Yeah. Lloyd takes him to court and gets a judgment, but the kid immediately declares bankruptcy to avoid paying a single dime. The money is legally gone forever.
So Lloyd is suddenly staring down the barrel of financial ruin all over again. His partners and other ventures have gone bankrupt. He is basically the last man standing, holding this massive bag of debt. He is driving down to Myrtle Beach to manually deliver a heavy iron door, passing right through the very town where this young thief lives.
And his human reaction is exactly what yours or mine would be. He is seething with fury. He tells God, I can't forgive this guy. I trusted him like a son. If you were standing in front of me right now, I'd punch him right in the face.
It is a completely natural response to a profound betrayal. But while he is driving, he experiences his second major paradigm shift. He hears a comforting voice in his mind.
But it's different this time.
Right, it isn't the booming, judgmental, authoritarian voice of the God he grew up fearing. The voice simply says, Lloyd, I know exactly how you feel. I was in it with you.
Lloyd describes this as feeling like a 5-year-old kid sitting in his father's lap, laughing and joking through the pain of his scraped knee.
Wow.
He realized he wasn't alone in the mess. The divine wasn't waiting at the finish line to grade his performance with a clipboard. It was sitting in the passenger seat with him.
This represents the final radical evolution of his worldview. He shifted from viewing his higher power as this distant, rule-enforcing bad cop to an intimate, empathetic co-sufferer. He calls it the Abba of Jesus, which is a term of deep familial intimacy.
And that internal shift radically changes his external behavior. On the drive back through their very same town, his hatred is entirely gone. He realizes this young man who stole from him was acting at a deep brokenness, lacking a true guiding father figure in his own life.
Yeah.
So what does Lloyd do? This is the ultimate plot twist. He literally calls the thief up and takes him out for coffee.
He buys a latte for the man who just ruined him financially. It completely defies conventional logic.
Could you sit down for coffee with someone who did that to you?
Man, I don't know. But when you truly internalize that your core identity is unconditionally supported, that your worth isn't tied to your bank account or your adherence to a rigid set of rules, the actions of a desperate, greedy young man can't actually destroy you.
That is so powerful.
You are free to feel empathy for the person who wronged you because your foundational safety is no longer threatened by them.
Right. Nothing about the math changed in that moment. He still owed $80,000 to his vendors. But everything about how he experienced that debt changed. That perfectly encapsulates Lloyd's concluding advice to anyone who is exhausting themselves searching for meaning or trying to find the real God through performance and rules. He simply says, you're already found.
You're already found. It completely strips away the anxiety of the search.
So as we pull all of these threads together, the core takeaway from Lloyd Clark's 76-year journey is just deeply liberating. True freedom doesn't come from gritting your teeth and forcing yourself to carry the heavy expectations placed on you by your family, your culture, or your religion.
No, it comes from the willingness to experience a paradigm shift. It is the profound realization that you have permission to simply put down the baggage you were handed.
Exactly.
And it is recognizing the self-freeing mechanics of radical forgiveness. Tearing up the demand for payback, refusing to play the game your abusers designed, is often the absolute only way to redraw your own map.
Which brings this entire story right back to you, the person listening to this. Because regardless of where you grew up or what industry you work in, every single one of us likely has a metaphorical venomous letter tucked away in our minds.
Oh,
A
definitely.
list of grievances, a deep resentment toward a system, a boss or a partner who betrayed us.
The question you have to ask yourself is holding on to that letter keeping you locked in the basement of your own mind? Are you still living in exile because you refuse to stop looking over your shoulder?
Exactly. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over today. Think about the landscape of your own life right now. What is a deeply held grudge or an identity that you are currently clinging to simply because letting it go would mean admitting that your map has been wrong for a very long time?
It is terrifying to realize your lenses are the wrong prescription.
It really is. But if you are brave enough to tear up your own 5-page letter today, what completely new, effortless paradigm might open up for you tomorrow?